Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Alina Islam, and I'm a mining analyst here at Red Cloud Securities. I'm very pleased to introduce Brunswick Exploration to you today, a hard rock lithium explorer with multiple projects across Canada. For the webinar today, we have with us Killian Charles, President and CEO. Killian will provide an introduction to the company, including an overview of activities underway at its pegmatite projects in Quebec and Ontario. After the presentation, we'll take your questions live. Please send us your questions via the chat box and we'll get through as many as we can. Before we get started though, I do need to mention the fine print. For Brunswick Exploration, there may be some forward-looking statements made on this call. I would direct listener to cautionary note on page 2 of the Brunswick Exploration corporate presentation located on the company's website. For Red Cloud Securities, I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation to purchase or sell securities or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this call does not take into account the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigations and seek their own professional advice before investment. Please see our most recent research located on our website for Brunswick Exploration specific disclosures. With that, I'll hand it over to you, Killian. Please take it away.
Thank you, Alina, for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here and talk about Brunswick Exploration. I guess I'll start off by saying yes, forest fires are having an impact in Quebec. We have had to put a stop to our exploration program in the province, having just started a few days ago. But we're quite confident that as the season progresses, we'll be in a position to re-enter the field, and we're fully supportive of the government's initiative to prevent the start of new forest fires in the province. I can tell you right now, here in Montreal, it's kind of gray and orangey from all that smoke, so we do hope that the situation can be brought under control. Now, Brunswick Exploration, it's a pretty unique story. It's not something that a lot of people have an opportunity to see. A company of this scope and scale in terms of, not only lithium exploration, but exploration in general. Over the last 18 months, we have grown Brunswick Exploration into the largest grassroots initiative for lithium exploration in Canada, de facto making us in North America the largest grassroots lithium exploration company. It's a very exciting time for Brunswick Exploration as, again, now we turn to field work and we look to sort through our actually world-class portfolio of targets across Atlantic Canada, Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan. We see a lot of opportunities for continued growth across this portfolio, and we hope to make many more announcements in the coming weeks and months. So let's dive right into it. Brunswick Exploration. As mentioned, we'll be making a fair amount of forward-looking statements today, so I invite you to read this at your leisure. Quite simply, we need more exploration. It's quite interesting to look at the lithium market as opposed to other commodities. Never have we faced such strong demand in such short amount of time for a particular commodity. Quite honestly, we have to focus on more lithium discoveries. Even if we were to build, ignoring permitting timelines, build every known lithium deposit out there, it probably still would not be enough to meet future demand. We quite honestly need to find new lithium assets. And companies like Brunswick Exploration are at the forefront of making these new discoveries. By virtue of our large-scale portfolio, we have given ourselves the best chances amongst any other company in the space of making significant discoveries in lithium. To generate these targets, we use a number of very interesting tools, including, PXRF, portable devices, allowing us to peer into the rocks themselves and ascertain the potential as to whether they contain lithium or not. I think everyone fully appreciates the fact that we're going to need to build a lot of lithium carbonate plants, essentially components to build lithium batteries. What people don't fully appreciate is the gap that's going to happen. This chart taken from UBS late last year really illustrates that point. It's great to build chemical plants. It's great to build battery plants, but there is a gap that's going to happen. What we can see here is that even if we include probable and possible, i.e. deposits that are just now entering feasibility, just now potentially being built, there is quite a substantial gap that starts to occur in 2026 and only worsens as time goes on. This is where Brunswick Exploration is focused on. It is the future, not deposits that are going to be in production tomorrow, but the next wave of deposits. That is what Brunswick Exploration has decided to consolidate. That is the opportunity. We have to understand that recycling won't be able to save us. Quite honestly, while they are an important component of other commodities, be it copper, zinc, or obviously the largest one, lead, lithium is still a nascent industry. We simply don't have enough lithium batteries out there to recycle to really meet any real demand. That's not to say that lithium recycling won't happen, but we need raw primary sources of this commodity to meet future demand. The interesting thing is most new companies in the lithium space have largely focused on more advanced assets. When I look at the portfolio of a company similar to Albemarle or Pilbara Minerals in Australia, they simply don't have a well-balanced portfolio. In the copper and gold space, it's quite normal to see a company like Barrick or Newmont have a variety of assets at a variety of different stages of development, whether it's from early stage grassroots exploration straight through near-term production, the next asset you're going to be bringing online. When I look at the lithium space, I simply don't see this. I see a number of companies that have late-stage assets, but most of the large-scale producers have a fairly barren portfolio. And so we fully expect this to evolve over the coming years as they seek to acquire new companies and start to invest in that space. The issue is that companies like Brunswick Exploration have done a lot of that consolidation before these larger, well-funded corporations have had a chance to do so. That puts us at a net advantage relative to companies that are, anywhere from 5 to 10 times our size. And we've done this by being geologically focused in terms of our exploration. Our model is not particularly complex. It is really a question of identifying geological terrains that we believe are host to lithium. And from there, identifying either through satellite imagery, historical maps, or any other tool that is at our disposal, potential pegmatites. Historically in Canada, we had no issues mapping pegmatites, and we mapped hundreds to thousands of them across the entire country. However, because they don't really have any gold or base metal potential, we ignored them. Lithium was simply not of any interest. And so for a long period of time, many pegmatites that we knew where they sat across the country simply had no one actually stepping on them, no one actually assessing the potential for lithium. And so that's what we did. We decided that we were going to consolidate at a very low cost as many of these targets as possible across the entire country with the objective of testing them, with the objective of going in the field and ascertaining, do they contain lithium, in this case, most typically the mineral spodumene, or not. What's important to realize is this is a continuous process. As we eliminate targets, or as we identify targets that have more potential for further work, be it drilling or, hopefully one day mining, we believe that we can continue adding to our portfolio. So even to this day, we are still acquiring, we are still growing our portfolio as we identify new opportunities and new terrains across all of Canada. Brunswick is focused on that growth. Brunswick believes in the opportunity to consolidate grassroots exploration in Canada. Just by way, as we stand right now, if I focus on our portfolio in just Eastern Canada, ignoring Manitoba and Saskatchewan, we're already over 250 targets solely in the James Bay region of Quebec, all of them having seen very little work. We obviously put out some results from our first drilling campaign, and we'll talk about those a little bit later, but we're quite confident that we have an opportunity to make new discoveries in our portfolio. What's interesting is typically exploration is a tough game. Why? Because most projects will fail. It's 1 in 1,000 that actually gets to go ahead and define a new discovery. And so our view was, well, instead of seeing 50 companies with one project, why not see one company with not 50 projects, but 500? That is something that is absolutely unique in the space. Across all of Canada, we have probably defined right now in excess of 800 pegmatites, all of them in the correct terrain, showing the correct indication that they might contain lithium. Now, we only estimate 1 to 2% of those actually do contain lithium, but it does puts us a better chance. Again, we get to play a little bit of that numbers game. The interesting thing is that it also allows us to be a little bit more selective. Lithium remains a bulk commodity, so we only restrained ourselves to areas that we knew were within 40 kilometers from infrastructure. There was a strategy to how we built our portfolio beyond the simple geological factors. And that is a strategy that continues as we continue to expand our portfolio. Right here, we see, broadly speaking, where we are active across all of Canada. We see more opportunities to grow beyond some of these targets. Let's dive in right now into our James Bay portfolio. Simply in James Bay, across 58 properties, which are highlighted right here, we have over 250 pegmatites that measure at least 500 meters strike length. And so we were hoping to be in the process of sorting them right now. We only got one field day across our portfolio, but we'll be back in the field quite shortly. We are quite confident that there are multiple discoveries to be made across this portfolio. Again, many times over, people identified pegmatites, but had no thought to go back in the field to see if there was any lithium potential. Concurrent to our portfolio program, our grassroots acquisition program, we have selectively added certain targets where we felt that there was, higher value or a higher likelihood of a new discovery. Some of those include our Plex project as well as our Mitchell project. Starting obviously with what is going to be probably one of the best projects, best deposits in the world, which is a CV5. It is truly a world-class asset and is an incredible discovery that was made here in Quebec. We have our Mitchell project, which sits just north of a number of other pegmatites that are in themselves mineralized in lithium. Our property has 4 pegmatites on the southern boundary that have never been ascertained for their potential in lithium. And so we hope at some point this summer to be able to go in the field and validate these targets. It is a high priority target for us, considering how close they sit from Patriot Battery's lithium-bearing pegmatites. Along the same trend that is host to CV5 and CV8 and CV13, we also have our Plex property, which we optioned from Osisko Development. There we have over 200 pegmatite showings, all of them untested for lithium. It is a perfect environment to host new lithium deposit. It just takes the time to go out there and ascertain the potential. Again, we hope to be there at the same time we'll be in Mitchell later this summer. As we move into other projects such as Anatakao and Anatakao West, where we had recently completed drilling, again, we see multiple opportunities. Here was an area, the James Bay project, which was historically owned by a company called Galaxy, eventually became Alchem. Alchem, which is now merging with Livent, had defined a 40 million ton resource. It is now actually a reserve as they try to bring this project into construction over the coming 12 to 24 months. Well, some of our claims abutted with their properties. And in 2018, dirt claims, they had drilled a number of spodumene-bearing pegmatites. We went ahead on our side of the property, and I'll return to this slide here, and sure enough, drilled a number of holes that all intercepted spodumene-bearing mineralization, including up to nearly 26 meters at 1.51% lithium at very, very shallow depths. We've only drilled it down to about a depth of 137 meters. There's still a lot of potential. If you look to Alchem's James Bay project next door, their pit goes down to a depth of approximately 250 meters. So we still see a lot of opportunities to continue growing. But it's more than just the drilling that we have here. It's the entire property itself. Taking a step back, there are a number of spodumene showings on the main Anatakal block that have seen no work. Again, geos came around, previously identified spodumene, yet no one could be bothered to go back and see, well, just how big are those pegmatites? Well, we've only had one day in the field, but I'm quite confident we'll be right back there soon enough, and we'll be working very hard in that area, following up on those spodumene showings that have been found in government databases. Really, the way we work is build that portfolio, go in the field, which is the critical phase that we're now entering for Brunswick exploration, ascertain the potential of the pegmatites, and then immediately move into that drilling phase. We're looking for bulk commodities. 10 to 20 meters is simply a start for us. We're looking for 50 to 75 meter intercepts. And so that's why we're continuously growing. We see opportunities and we can still build tons, but there's more large scale discoveries to be made in Canada. And we want to make sure that Brunswick takes advantage of that. As we move further back and look the rest of our portfolio, which obviously is going to be a focus for us right now as we're locked out of Quebec due to forest fires, we have teams operating right now in the Hurst project. We have teams operating currently in Manitoba because sadly, Saskatchewan is also challenged with forest fires, and we have preemptively, I should say, decided to pull back our teams while the situation is brought back into control. And we will be going there a little bit later this summer. But we have focused our teams in these two particular provinces. We see a lot of opportunities there. The Hurst project is a very interesting project sitting right on the side of the Trans-Canadian Highway. The CN rail line is there. We are only 20 minutes out from town. And we have a spodumene-bearing pegmatite, which I will flip to the next slide here, which we've done some drilling with results expected to be published in the coming weeks. But the whole regional area has seen very, very little exploration. Why? Because historically, no one could be bothered to go looking out for lithium. We are going ahead and fixing that. And by focusing on this area, we hope to identify new spodumene-bearing zones in the vicinity of the decoy pegmatite that will also then be drilled. It's a very exciting time for Brunswick exploration as, again, we are out there in the field making these new discoveries. In Manitoba and Saskatchewan, we have built a rather impressive portfolio. We were one of the first movers in the province of Saskatchewan. Quite honestly, we saw everything that had been done in Manitoba and in Western Ontario, the amount of new showings and new discoveries. And we found it kind of interesting that, well, to be quite frank, those rocks continued on the other side of the Saskatchewan-Manitoba border, but no one had ever looked to see if there was any potential there. So we are going to be working many of these projects for the first time, starting to build a critical mineral strategy on a grand scale, at a provincial and even countrywide scale, to ascertain the potential for brand new targets. Brunswick exploration is fully financed to meet these objectives. We have completed a $9.5 million financing over the last few months here, providing us with ample opportunity to continue growing the company, continue acquiring new projects, but more importantly, executing on our exploration plan, whether they be in Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, or Atlantic Canada. We will have many more announcements as we progress over the summer identifying and hopefully discovering new spodumene bearing pegmatites, which will transition into a second half of the year where we will more fully enter drilling and build out many of these new opportunities. But while this is happening, we're still looking for new growth, still looking for new areas to acquire, new pegmatites that have seen very little work so that we can bring them in our portfolio and continue growing the company. So that's it in a nutshell. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks a lot, Killian. That was a great presentation. So we'll now get the Q&A portion of the webinar started. Just as a reminder for our participants, you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. So, Killian, we have a couple of questions already. I guess addressing the PR from this morning in the forest fires, is there any direct impact to any of your claims in Quebec?
No, absolutely not. The forest fires are further to the south. You have to understand that it's pretty much every single company. If there's a company active pretty much anywhere in the Abitibi region or the James Bay region of Quebec, I can tell you right now that they're not working. Everyone has had to have the same decision. The government wishes to prevent the start of new forest fires. So it's not necessarily because there's a forest fire near any of our claims, which there's not. It is simply to prevent the start of a new forest fire. The critical regions right now are in northern Abitibi and in the Sept-Îles region of Quebec. So for us, it is a preventive measure, and we're fully supportive of the government's initiative to stop the start of new forest fires. That's why we're quite confident that as the forest fires are brought under control over the coming days and weeks, they will progressively reallow companies to go ahead and do work once more. But no, as it stands for our projects right now, there is no direct impact. It is purely preventive. It's to allow our employees to safely evacuate the site so that and then also free up our helicopters to work for the government in terms of ferrying material and personnel to support the fight against these fires.
Okay, so I guess on that note, one of your press releases had drilling mentioned at Handsome Lake, I guess in Q3. Is that also likely to be delayed?
So right now, exactly, because we are in a little bit of a tight position from that front, we've pushed back some of our timetables on that front. We'll still be in an opportunity to go there this summer and start doing the work that is necessary. But right now, safety first. Let's go ahead and work in areas that have no forest fires, which is dominantly Manitoba, Ontario, and Atlantic Canada.
Okay. So, Killian, a very large portfolio. How does the team decide which areas it's going to prioritize?
So it's an excellent question, and it's something that's a little bit abnormal. It's very rare for a company like Brunswick Exploration to have such a large portfolio and decide to do it themselves. We're not interested in right off day one trying to sign a JV with another major and then work on their timetable. We have the capacity and the capital to do that work ourselves. The reason why we're confident in having such a large portfolio is the efficiency of exploring. When we look and land on a particular pegmatite, we have two main ways of ascertaining the potential. One is mineralogy. Obviously, if I see spodumene and I'm pretty happy that I'm dealing with a lithium-bearing pegmatite, the job is done. Then we can move into further steps such as drilling. But let's say we're in an example where we're not seeing spodumene because we're in a different zone or we don't have a good exposure. Well, what we can actually use is certain tools and device that allow us to key in on geochemical pathfinder elements. And the presence of those elements allows us to know whether the pegmatite has the potential of containing lithium or not. We're not actually looking for lithium. We're looking for elements that will say travel alongside lithium into these pegmatites. And the presence of those elements in certain minerals at a certain concentration allows our teams in the field to make a decision quite rapidly. you have to understand that if it was copper or gold, we'd have our team scouring these large portfolios in the hopes of finding quartz vein and grabbing samples, and maybe one of them runs. That's how it works in that particular space. Specifically, when it comes to lithium, we know they outcrop. We can actually visually identify them from satellite imagery. So, we can physically land on them. We know where the team is going to be working. And then on top of that, we can go ahead and sort them quite rapidly, often in a matter of minutes, which is honestly quite astounding. That allows us to maintain efficiency. Yes, we build a portfolio of hundreds of targets. How do we, pick out which one is better? At this point in time, we don't. We go in believing that unless it obviously contains lithium or spodumene, then we'll go ahead and drill it. But we take a larger scale view of let's just sort them. Let's find the ones that we want to keep and the ones that we want to drop. We're not interested in holding a large portfolio and keeping these fees, these recurring fees on a yearly basis. There's no point in doing that. We will quite simply drop the claims that we do not believe have any potential to focus, to whittle down into a smaller subgroup that are worthy of more work. So right now, that's simply how it works. Obviously the ones that have spodumene, then we'll move a little bit faster on them, just as we saw in at the Cal West. We brought the drill rigs right away. We saw an opportunity there. There's going to be more projects sort of moving along in that same way. Same thing for Hurst. But fundamentally, for everything else, we just take an approach of we'll just get to it. So we have a team that goes, let's say we'll use an example, goes through Manitoba, evaluates every pegmatite in Manitoba, and on a weekly basis, all right, these we'll want to keep, these we'll want to drop. And so we'll continuously do that for years to come as we sort through our portfolio and continue growing that base of more advanced targets that are worthy of drilling, in the hopes of finding, we'll call it a materially significant discovery.
Okay, so let's talk about Antarctica West. Results from 12 holes already available, 6 more coming. Do you see any more follow-up work planned there this year?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I see more work. What's quite interesting there is that here's an area where we drilled. We knew there was potential for lithium, but we haven't even prospected. We haven't even actually walked across that property. And so that's why we took the decision, okay, we've drilled it. We've drilled this area. We've defined something very, very interesting. But before we continue drilling there, let's understand what else is around there. Maybe there's something even better sitting nearby. And so that's where we want to make sure we're always spending the capital in the correct fashion. I can drill year round in Canada, right? Doesn't matter if it's winter or summer, I can drill year round. Sadly, I can't prospect year round. Snow is a little bit of an impediment to that. So it's critical that during the summer months, barring forest fires, it's critical that during the summer months, we focus our teams as much as possible on sorting targets. That's why we're working on those types of targets right now, so that as we move into the second half of this year, the back half of this year, we will be back there drilling once more. Absolutely, we see a lot more potential around there. It's just we want to make sure that we're doing all of these steps in a correct, systematic approach so that we spend dollars in a judicious fashion, but also in a fashion that has the largest impact for our shareholders.
Okay, so what about Hurst Killian? Any update there, like anything you're seeing in the core, or how many holes or meterage that we've completed there?
So we've done our first pass of drilling. We'll be releasing results around that quite shortly. Hurst is again an area that has seen very little work. We have teams currently right now prospecting. Took a little bit longer for the snow to melt around there to be prospecting, but now the teams have spent approximately 2 weeks out in the field. And we hope to see more announcements over the coming weeks and months around that property. It's a very exciting project that has seen, to be quite honest, very little work. To me, that's what excites me. When somebody finds a single spodumene showing, these things usually happen in clusters, right? We always use that example when it comes to VMS, volcanic massive sulfide deposits, where, it's like, well, if there's one, there's going to be lots more. That's a classic model around a VMS. Well, it turns out in the lithium space, it's not identical, but you can apply that same mentality. So when there's an area where one showing has been found, to me, it speaks to the potential of that area. That whole area needs to be tested and needs to be prospected to make sure that, we fully ascertain the potential.
Okay. A lot of questions here, Killian, about Plex. Is there any update you can share on the historical core that was assayed?
Yeah, so we went quickly in the winter months back in April to ascertain the potential around Plex. We did not see spodumene, but we saw indication that we are dealing with the right types of rocks. And so from that perspective, for us, it's indicative that the whole area warrants our option agreement, warrants much more work around there. There's a lot of high priority targets that we absolutely have to focus on, that the historical drilling has allowed us to zero in on.
Okay, all right. So Killian, question here on whether you're considering an ASX listing.
That is something that we are exploring. It's not to say that we are going to do it. We do see opportunities to expand the story to other investor groups that have a lot of knowledge around lithium. There's no way around it that many of the companies that are active in Canada are Australian companies. They are exploring predominantly for lithium, more so than Canadian companies. Brunswick stands a little bit apart from that perspective, being one of the only or one of the few companies from that perspective that is exploring around here. So on that basis, it is something that we are exploring at a corporate level. We just received our OTCQB listing in the US, allowing American investors to participate as well in the Brunswick exploration story. So for us, anything that facilitates trading liquidity, allows us to tap into new potential shareholders, is a net gain for the company itself and its current shareholder base.
All right. Another question here. You talked about in your presentation, Killian, how you are evaluating, new areas, new projects. So the question here is, are you seeing any price pressure for new pegmatite projects?
So I would say for some of them, the answer is yes. Luckily, the gold price got up. So a lot of companies that used to call themselves gold companies then went to lithium. They're now back to being gold companies. So that facilitates it for us a little bit. There is a slightly higher price for certain assets. However, we remain truly focused on new discoveries as well in areas where no one has even bothered to look as of yet. And so that cost has not gone up. We're still able to stake. We're still able to claim in interesting areas where there is a lot of potential for lithium-bearing pegmatites. And that's not going to stop anytime soon. We're not making any new announcement, even though the information around that is technically public in various provincial databases. But, in our view, those are for 2024 and 2025 type of programs. Irrespective of any great new discovery we'll have this year, we still believe that this is a unique opportunity in the lithium space. Truly never have we been faced with an even starting line. When I think about copper, when I think about bronze, commodities we've been exploring since the Bronze Age I said bronze, I meant gold. Commodities we've been exploring since the Bronze Age. We've spent a lot of efforts. Companies bigger than Brunswick have already explored, done a lot of exploration across all of Quebec, all of Ontario, all of Manitoba, all of Saskatchewan. But on the lithium side, we're all starting from that same point. And so Brunswick is able to push and define new areas for lithium exploration. And so we're at the start of an industry here, and that's something that a lot of people don't fully appreciate. It's not mature like copper, it's not mature like zinc, it's not mature of an industry like gold. And so as long as we see opportunities to continue staking at a low cost, where there's no cost increase there because we're just directly staking it from the government, we will continue to do so. We will absolutely continue to do so. It's important to remember Australia saw that from 2010 to 2022. It's in excess of $25 billion of value that was created in the lithium space. And I'll be honest, Canada has the exact same potential. We're starting from further back, but give Canada 10 years and give companies like Brunswick Exploration, maybe not that same time frame. We would like to be a lot faster, but that's why it's such a great opportunity here. There's going to be more discoveries made, and I sure hope it's Brunswick Exploration that's going to make them.
Right. Okay, so a couple of follow-up questions, Killian. We talked about your large land package portfolio. So on the number of pegmatites that you've discovered, is there a time limit? So is there a period within which the pegmatite needs to be assessed, otherwise it will be, dropped or returned?
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. So obviously our option agreements have a very defined time frame. It varies province by province, from 1 year in Newfoundland all the way up to certain areas, and this will shock a lot of people, but in places like Alberta, you are given 14 years to ascertain the potential, which is quite a long time. On average, it's more between 2 and 3 years, which is an ample enough amount of time to go through our targets and sort them. Again, if they contain nothing, then that's fine. We can drop them on the moment. If we see that there's potential there, then we can rapidly start doing work and focus on those areas and meet the work commitments from the government and continue paying fees to keep those claims in good standing. So we have more than enough time to go through our targets. That's why we're still growing. That's why we're still acquiring. That's why we have our plans for 2024 and 2025. Irrespective of any discoveries we make this year, we believe that we're going to be doing this for a long time to come, and we're going to be very successful doing it.
Okay, so moving back to Antarctica West, is it something that you would want to develop yourself, or would you look to sell it to Alchem?
It's an excellent question. We have to be flexible at how we look at our entire portfolio. Some assets we will keep for ourselves. We will develop. We will, work it through the various studies, the various stages of development that are necessary. Others may be sold at an earlier stage. It's hard. It's a little bit hard at any one point in time to say, okay, well, this is exactly what the plan is going to be. I find a lot of companies trip over themselves once they stick to a very rigid plan. If an opportunity arises and it is beneficial to ourselves and to our shareholders, remembering that management owns a substantial amount of the company, we will engage on that opportunity. But if it doesn't make sense, if shareholders and ourselves cannot participate in that value creation, then we'll ignore it and focus on doing the work ourselves. We have that capacity. We know what we're doing. We've built the team to go ahead and execute on every facet of the exploration and development of these assets.
Okay, any plans to expand into the Northwest Territories or Yukon?
We're always looking. We're always looking at what else is out there. We're staying at the forefront as much as we can. I can't point exactly to an area right now and say, we're definitely going to be in Yukon. That's not going to be the case. We're evaluating all of these opportunities, and if they compare favorably to what we have in our portfolio, and I promise you, yes, we will be there in due time, and we will make announcements around that in due time.
Okay, all right. So last couple of questions here. Other than Handsome Lake, do you have any drill plans for the back half of the year?
we will be making announcements around that in the coming weeks.
Okay. All right.
It's that simple. It's that simple. Look, we have lots of things we want to go working on. There's no doubt about it. It's just, and I'm really excited to get talking about that.
Okay. And then lastly, I'm just going to ask you to wrap up, Killian, and just provide an overview of upcoming catalysts in the next 6 months, let's say.
Yeah. So for us, over the next 3 months, we're going to be focused on field work. We have announcements to make around that. And then as we move into the second half of this year, as I mentioned, that's when we transition into those drill targets. That's when we start to move the needle on that front. We have the capacity, both from a technical, personnel, and financial capacity to execute on those plans. You know, Brunswick is quite unique on the space. We are the largest grassroots lithium company in North America. And, you know, we still feel we have a lot more to give to the market.
All right. Well, a lot to look forward to. That's it for the Q&A portion of our webinar. Killian, thank you so much for hosting this webinar with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Just as a reminder for our audience, our next webinar will feature Torque Resources, and that's tomorrow, June 7th at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thanks for tuning in with us, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.